Rawson Twitchell runs inside. Rawson Twitchell into the second level, the 10, the 5, touchdown Butte County.
It's time for another weekend of high school football in Idaho, and it's time for another edition of Gem State Game Day.
Simmons to throw. Going deep down the field. He's got a man isolated. Did he catch it? He did. Yeah. In traffic. What a grab by Guy Wheeler.
Before you head out tonight to cheer on your favorite team, get caught up on the latest news, notes, and previews from this weekend's gridiron action.
Here's the snap, and it's intercepted at the 10-yard line. That's Bodie Brackenberry. Jackalow sniffed it out.
Gem State Game Day is brought to you by Valleywide Cooperative, Project Filter, and the Idaho Transportation Department.
This one's going to go all the way, 70 yards, no flag, touchdown Valley View. Austin Belknap, 70 yards to the house. Buckle up, here we go.
That's right. Welcome in to the Week 8 edition of Gem State Game Day, live on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, and X account. We do this live every Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 7 a.m. Pacific Time. I have seen football teams or athletes doing that early morning weightlifting class, and they've got Gem State Game Day up on the big TV in the weight room. So we are glad you are tuned in. Of course, if you're not watching live, you can tune in anytime, Thursday or Friday, right here on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, and X account. My name is Brandon Baney. Let's introduce you to the panel this week. Let's start with the general manager and Treasure Valley Prepcast host, Paul Kingsbury. You are the GM at IdahoSports.com, and you've got a friend with you this morning.
I've got the official mascot of Idaho Sports, Kuma. Kuma, the dog, is joining us this morning. She needs some attention. She'll lay down in a minute.
We're off to a good professional start here. Now let's go to the guy that decided to wear sunglasses indoors, Scott Burton, cool rider, our Magic Valley Prepcast host. Hello, Scott.
Hey, what's going on, fellas? I was actually, last night I was doing a little bit of work on my motorcycle, and the song Cool Rider popped into my head, and I couldn't get it out, and I haven't been able to get it out. Now, bonus points, tell me, where's that from?
It's a song.
Yeah. I mean, this is obscure.
No clue.
You got me.
Grease 2.
Well, I've never seen Grease 1, so that checks out.
Cool Rider. Michelle Pfeiffer sang it in Grease 2. And for some reason, that popped in my head, and I haven't been able to get it out. And Cool Rider's who I am today. Hence the shades.
Well, we're not going quite as far back as the days of Michelle Pfeiffer. We're just going to go back in time 1 week here on Gem State Game Day. We always start the show by taking a look at last week's headlines. What were the big storylines from Game 7, Week 7 of the Idaho high school football season? Well, guys, right off the bat, no bigger headline than Weiser suffocates Homedale in a breakthrough win. Weiser coach Tom Harrison gets his first win over Homedale in his Wolverines career, 30-6 the final. The defense forced 4 interceptions and a fumble, and this is Homedale's first conference loss since 2017 against Fruitland. How about Rigby? Turns back Highland for their first loss, a 33-3 victory for the Trojans. They're now 4-1 overall. Jersey Duenas, 8 carries, 86 yards and a touchdown. Amani Morell, 8 carries for 47 yards and 2 TDs. Highland now 6-1 on the season. And Aberdeen shuts out North Fremont in a battle of unbeatens, 29-0. Aberdeen now 5-0. Lupe Ortiz, the slippery quarterback, 2 rushing touchdowns. North Fremont, meanwhile, drops to 4-1. And now as we turn the page to October, I mean, all 3 of those games we highlighted, they were conference matchups. Well, Aberdeen North Fremont was an all East Idaho battle, but they were important games in terms of playoff positioning. And that's what we're going to bring you here on Gem State Game Day in just a little bit. If the playoffs started today, what would the brackets look like and all of that fun stuff. But we have to start first with one more look back to last week, guys. This is our uncut gem of the week. This was the most exciting game, start to finish, regardless of the implications, and it takes us to the 1A level. Yes, 8-man football for the first time this year on Gem State Game Day, going to be featured in our uncut gem of the week. Council defeats Tri-Valley 50-46 in a long pin conference showdown, Paul. The two quarterbacks, the two gunslingers, yeah, they brought their lunch pails and their hard hats. How about Owen Hatfield, the quarterback for Council? He rushes for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. He passes for 108 yards and another score. And then on defense, 6 tackles, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovery, Paul. And the game-winning touchdown came like in the final minute of regulation. Right. Pretty incredible.
I think he got his athleticism from his, second cousin Clay Hatfield, who works for us. They are related. But yeah, we actually talked about this game, I think, on our Treasure Valley Prepcast last week, and it was in our pick 6. And I'm watching the Friday Night Flash on Friday. I'm at Highland, and I picked Tri-Valley, of course, because they lost. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, Tri-Valley's ahead. Okay, great. And what a great game, 50-46. That's what 8-man football is all about, right? A lot of scoring, and it's close, and you've got studs on both sides of the line doing battle. Yeah, that was a great game.
And then Tri-Valley's quarterback, Jace Wagner, comes up just short. He rushed for 213 yards and 5 touchdowns. And on defense, he recovered 2 fumbles and took one of those fumbles back for a defensive touchdown. And he had 14 tackles. Scott, these communities, Council and Cambridge, where Tri-Valley plays their games, of course, it's Cambridge and Midvale, the co-op. They're only 20 minutes apart. So these two know each other pretty well to the point where both Owen Hatfield and Jace Wagner, the opposing quarterbacks, they wrestled together for the North Country Wrestling Club. So they know each other pretty well, Scott.
Yeah, this is kind of like a Tobacco Road rivalry, if you will. And, it's funny because when you get into these rivalry games where you're just next door neighbors, it tends to bring out just the best in you because, you want to beat your neighbor. And it's, pardon the joke, but the Hatfield and McCoys, right?
Yeah.
Because you just want to beat your rival just up the road. And boy, what a performance by both of these guys, Hatfield and Wagner. And my gosh, video game type numbers, the scores. Yeah. And the cool thing about it is, games like this, they're going to walk off the field and be friends because like you mentioned, they wrestled together. They're going to take each other's best punch and then they're going to be cool afterwards. And that's a cool thing about like Council and Tri-Valley.
Yeah, Jace Wagner did text Owen Hatfield after the game and just said, hey, good game. Way to go.
Amen.
Yep. Yeah. So let's take a look here, guys, at the Week 8 landscape for Class 1A football. Again, standings to your left, schedule of games to the right. And right away, if we look at the long pin conference, this was a significant battle. Council now 2-0 in league play. Tri-Valley drops to 1-1. It was their first loss of the season. They're 5-1 overall. So it's Garden Valley and Council now tied atop the long pin. They're each 2-0. Genesee and Deary tied for first, and the White Pine still. Lakeside still in front in the North Star League. Dietrich is 4-0 in the Sawtooth. Cary is 3-0 right on their heels, and then Rockland maintaining that 2-0 lead in the Rocky Mountain Conference. Scott, there are no shortage of great games on the 1A schedule this week. Give me one that you've got your eye on. I think I know where you're going to go with this, right in your backyard in the Magic Valley, but you tell me.
Yeah, how do you not choose Cary and Dietrich? Number 1 in the state, traveling to number 2 in the state, and the conference lead and perhaps the conference championship on the line, depending on how the rest of the season goes. These are 2 really good teams that, statistically are very similar. They're both scoring on an average of 56, 57 points a game, upper 50s, giving up 14, 15 a game. Cary's only loss was to Powerhouse 2A Butte County, who's undefeated, and so they're both driven by their quarterbacks. Cary, Preston Wood does just about everything for them. He's averaging 107 yards a game, 14 touchdowns, and just 1 interception. He's also their rushing leader, so, this is the guy for Cary that does just about everything. And, on defense for Cary, they've got a couple of studs there. Junior Will Park is leading the way in tackles, and by far the team leader. And he's a guy that's just all around the football. And, this is a Cary team that's motivated. And then you go to Dietrich, undefeated, and Connor Perkins, their quarterback, Mr. Do Everything. Last week, I mean, he threw for 4 touchdowns and had 2 rushing touchdowns. And, these are guys that on offense can really get the things done. Isaac Ward had probably the best stat line last week, 3 catches, 3 touchdowns. But, they've got some players over there. So this is about as evenly matched game as I think you're going to find. And, boy, I'm really interested to see how this one comes out.
Well, for those that are interested in how this one might shake out, this is our Gem State Game of the Week on IdahoSports.com. We pick one game above all the others every week in the great state of Idaho, and we give it a little extra polish and shine. We have multiple cameras, enhanced graphics, really like you're watching a game on TV. That's the presentation of it, and I can't wait for Carey and Dietrich, our Gem State Game of the Week, this Friday night on IdahoSports.com. Paul, what do you think of this Week 8 slate here in the Class 1A landscape? Is there a game you've got your eye on?
Same one. I'm going to be at that game. And just everything that he just said, I will say amen. You look at Carey last year, 3-6. You don't see that very often in Carey, Idaho. This year, senior heavy. Preston Wood at quarterback, Connor Perkins a junior. Neither team ended their seasons last year the way they wanted. There was a tough 90-0 loss to Kendrick in the Kibbe Dome. So both these teams coming in with something to prove. I mean, both these teams are perennial powerhouses and now conference foes, 1-2 in conference, 6-0, 5-1. I mean, it's made for TV here, but it's going to be in Dietrich, Idaho on IdahoSports.com.
Yeah, just quickly, the rest of the 1A landscape here in Week 8. Don't tell anybody, but Shoshone quietly having their best season in over a decade.
Yeah.
The Shoshone Indians are 4-1 on the season. They're 3-0 in Sawtooth Conference play. They still have to play Dietrich and Carey both, obviously, but if they can finish third and go to the playoffs, the last 2 years, the third place team from this Sawtooth Conference has gone on the road to a league champion in the opening round of the postseason and scored the KO. 2 years ago, it was Camas County. Remember, they went to North Gem and beat the Cowboys in just an all-time stunner of a game. Camas County didn't even have hardly enough guys to finish the game. They were bleeding the clock as much as they could. Last year, Dietrich takes third. They go to Council, the long pin champs in the opening round, and they knock out a semifinal favorite in the Lumberjacks. So if Shoshone can finish in that third slot, hey, could we see it 3 years in a row? Nothing's impossible for first-year coach Mike Nunnally. The other big game, obviously, is Garden Valley at Council, and Shoshone is hosting Hanson this Friday night, so a good chance for Shoshone to move to 5-1 on the season. They haven't made the playoffs since 2000, guys. It was the turn of the millennium, so it gives you an idea of what they're up to there. But the other big game, of course, is Garden Valley and Council, right? The winner of that is going to be in the driver's seat for the Long Pin Conference regular season title. Garden Valley, of course, still has to play Tri-Valley, but if Council can beat Garden Valley, and they've already beaten Tri-Valley, I mean, it sets up really nicely for the Lumberjacks to repeat as Long Pin champions, but we shall see. Let's take a look, guys. If the playoffs started today in the 1A landscape, what would it look like here? I'm going to share my screen. This is just a very crude bracket that I have put together. If you're watching this on the IdahoSports.com YouTube channel, Facebook page, or X account, you'll just want to make your screen full size so you can read the text a little easier. I've got the current Max Preps rankings to the right, and then the bracket to the left. The way this bracket works is there are 5 conferences in 1A football. The 4 highest ranked conference champions earn first round buys. For the moment, that would be Dietrich, Garden Valley, Rockland, and Lakeside. How do we figure out that Garden Valley is our conference champ, quote unquote? Well, we look at the league standings, and if there's a tie, we defer to whoever has the higher Max Preps ranking. So that's how we figure that out there. And Dietrich is technically 4-0 in conference. Carey is 3-0. That's why we give Dietrich the nod there. But Dietrich, Garden Valley, Rockland, Lakeside would have the buys. Deary, as the 5th conference champion, would automatically get the number 5 seed, and they would play the lowest seeded play-in team. Other play-in games, Carey would host Chalice, 6 versus 11. 7, Tri-Valley would host 10, North Gem. 8 and 9 would be Council and Shoshone. Council's like, no, we don't want to see the third place team from the Sawtooth again. We lived that movie last year. And then Mackey would get in right now as the last team into the playoffs. Mackey as the 12 seed would have to go all the way up to Deary. Who's on the cut line right now? Well, if you look at the Max Preps rankings, Cascade is actually 12th, and there are 12 teams in the playoffs, but there is a league champion below them in Deary. And so Cascade is on the cut line right now. Wallace, despite a 5-1 start, they are on the cut line. Those are teams that still have work to do, but they are closing the gap. Scott, what is your initial thought when you look at this hypothetical 1A bracket?
It's not going to look like this next week.
No, it's not. Not even close.
No, and one game could flip this thing on its ear. And not just the brackets, but we learned this about Max Preps rankings too, is that it's going to take one game with that trickle-down effect, and it doesn't even look the same. I mean, that's my initial reaction. But if this were exactly how it turned out, I don't know. I really don't know if it's going to be a Carey Dietrich matchup again. But again, you can't even say that because they're going to play this week, and we'll see how that shakes out. So I'm going to defer back to what I said. It's not going to look the same.
Well, I think whatever happens here, Dietrich, Carey, whoever wins that, they'll probably still be the 1 seed.
Right.
And whoever loses will be the 6th seed. They'd be on opposite sides of the bracket. I think no matter what happens or unless something really wild happened here, Paul, but what's your initial thoughts looking at this?
Well, my first one was Wallace. I mean, they just got, they have talent, right? Quarterback's name. Help me out, Brandon.
Cooper Miller, freshman.
Yeah. Yes. They've been putting points on, and the rest of the way for them is Clark Fork, Court of Christ, and then the last game of the season is going to be the conference championship, I think, Lakeside. And we're going to have a broadcast team at that one, I believe. And that's the one that I think I think Wallace is going to get in. I think Wallace is going to be on your bracket at the end of the day. It'd be a travesty if they're not. I would love to see Wallace, the Miners, making that appearance at the state tournament and upsetting some teams. I really do. Those way north teams, they're forgotten, they're lost. No one pays attention to them. And Kendrick, when they first started winning, they were the dark horse. Now they're not. You can't go under the radar if you're Kendrick. And I think Wallace this year might be a little underrated.
For sure. Well, speaking of Kendrick, let's go ahead and move on up to Kendrick's new home, the 2A classification. Boy, they had a nice win over Potlatch last week, battle of previously undefeated teams. Here are the 2A standings on the left, the 2A schedule on the right. So it's still Logos leading the White Pine at 5-0. Kendrick is right there at 4-0. They play not this week, but next week. Should be a monumental battle to be sure. Rimrock still leading the Western Idaho Conference at 1-0. Valley on top of the Snake River Conference at 4-0. Butte County and Grace still just kind of hanging out. They're going to play their one conference game in the final week of the season for all the marbles there. Paul, this week 8 schedule for Class 2A, what game do you have your eye on?
Butte County and Raft River. Raft River went in and lost to Glenns Ferry. It's their first loss on the season, and they lost 32-8 to Glenns Ferry. So was it a fluke? I mean, can the Trojans get their mojo back this week and beat Butte County, who everybody basically has picked to repeat as a state champion? Chad Evans has been coaching at Raft River a long time. So Sam Thorngren at Butte County. 2 great programs, and after a loss to Glenns Ferry, I think that Raft River is going to come out with a little bit of a chip. Not saying, Glenns Ferry is a great team this year, but I don't think anybody saw that big of a deficit, 32-8. So that's the one I'm looking at. Is I'm not expecting Raft River to win, but if they can keep it close, I think that would be a quote win for Raft River.
Yeah, the key is for Raft River is Kai Ward back in the lineup. Their standout running back, linebacker, and kicker. He got injured early in that Glenns Ferry game, and we saw how that shook out. And so if Kai Ward is back and in the mix, could be a pretty good one. Scott, what's the game you're looking at?
Well, the one I'm looking at is, again, in my backyard. It's going to be Hagerman and Glenns Ferry. This is again, 2 teams that are really, really good. Both tied for 5th place in the latest coaches poll. But this is a big game for Hagerman because they need to keep pace with Valley, who they lost to. And, and I'm somewhat familiar with Hagerman just because they're right here, and called their game against Kendrick last year and just really started to follow this team a little bit. And this is a really talented team that can score points like nobody's business. This is a team that's averaging over 68 points a game. I mean, they hung 90 on somebody this year. This is a really good offensive football team led by their junior quarterback, Wyatt Mavenkamp, who's thrown for almost 1,500 yards, 27 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions. And then you've got dudes like Kai Kendall, who is just all over the place. And I remember calling both of these kids last year in the broadcast saying, man, this is going to be a really good team. And Kendall, has over 1,000 yards rushing. He's averaging 176 rushing yards a game, and defensively, very aggressive. I mean, they already have in their 6 games, 60 tackles for loss. I mean, this is a defense that will just pin their ears back and come at you. That means they're going to make a big play. That means they might give up a big play, right. But I really like the way that they play. Glens Ferry, on the other hand, I mean, they're a little bit more pedestrian defensively, giving up 24 points a game, averaging about 37. But, this is a team in Glens Ferry that needs another signature win. They got that win over Raft River, and after that, they dropped one. So this is a team in Glens Ferry that just says, you know what, hey, we got to get another big win because we're not going to hang our season on just beating Raft River. We got to be better than that, and for them, it's going to be controlling the clock. I mean, they've got Bryce Sterling, Josiah Valencia, Landon Stewart. Those are the guys that are going to have to carry the mail for this Glens Ferry team, control the clock, ground and pound, and keep the ball away from Mavenkamp and the Hagerman Pirates. So I really like the way this shapes up, just because they're 2 good teams, but they're very different.
Yep. Other highlights on the schedule, Oakley and Murtaugh, those 2 teams were picked in a tie for first in our preseason coaches poll in that Snake River Conference. They come in a combined 0-12. Somebody is going to get their first win of the season, which is always great to see. Centennial Baptist decided, hey, we're going to give it a go. They tried to start at the start of the year, didn't have enough players. They said, you know what, we're going to get it together in time for our conference schedule in October. They lost their first game last week. They'll get back out there again this week at notice. And that's the other thing. They don't have a home field. It's 4 road games here over the final 4 weeks of the season for Centennial Baptist. The game I'm looking at, guys, is up north, though, in the White Pine League. Potlatch and Prairie, those 2 teams currently tied for 3rd in the conference. They're both 3-1 in White Pine play. The winner of this game has the inside track on finishing in 3rd place, potentially behind Logos and Kendrick. So Potlatch just fell to Kendrick last week. Prairie fell to Logos 2 weeks ago. That's each of their losses on the conference ledger. So an important one there in Cottonwood Friday night as well. Let's go back to our playoff brackets here. Here's what the 2A state playoff bracket would look like if the playoffs started today. This one's a little simpler. There's only 4 districts, so the 4 district champions all receive a first-round bye, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're automatically going to get the top 4 seeds. The quarterfinals will be reseeded based upon Max Prep's rankings. So you can see, guys, already, Rimrock, our projected champion from District 3, they're going to be that number 8 seed for the quarterfinals because in the Max Prep rankings, they are number 16 overall. You can pretty much lock that in. We've got Butte County as the 2 seed, Logos as the 3, and Valley as the 4 seed. That is factoring in that if Kendrick were to win their first round game, they would inherit that number 1 seed as the number 1 team in the Max Preps rankings. And of course, the only reason we have Logos as our league champ is because they're 5-0. Kendrick is 4-0. It's just semantics. The play-in games, if the playoffs started today, would be Potlatch at Kendrick, Glens Ferry at Hagerman. Hey, that's going to be a matchup this week. Prairie at Grace, and then Raft River at Kamei. Paul, anything jump out to you here?
Those are going to be fun. I mean, if this was today, how cool would this bracket be? And looking ahead, way ahead. That if it's a Kendrick, if everything goes to chalk, Kendrick, Butte County that would be up at, would it be in the Kibbe?
I think
played each way. Yeah.
Kendrick was in the Kibbe Dome last year, but of course that was for the 1A championship and they've moved up. So they could, because of a quirk, they might be at home 2 years in a row for sure. Teams on the cut line. This to me is kind of the most clearly defined because the teams that are just outside the playoff picture are Murtaugh and Oakley. Scott, they're currently 12th and 13th in the MaxPreps rankings based on the strength of their league. Both of them are winless, though. You figure they would have to win out to really secure an at-large bid. So this is kind of the most settled playoff picture to me.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. Murtaugh and Oakley, I mean, rough seasons for both of them. I'm not sure playoffs is playoffs. I'm sure it's not really the focal point. Let's just put a game together and let's get a W, but you're right. I mean, this one is probably the most set. And, if I'm all these other teams that are looking at this bracket, I'm thinking, okay, where's Kendrick going to line up? And how do I stay away from them? Because they're the team to beat. They always have been. And it seems to be that way this year. So I'm really looking at this whole two-way thing is who is going to be the team that's going to be able to challenge Kendrick? And will that matchup happen in the championship game, or will that be one of those things that is in the semifinals or whatever? But again, this is a bracket that's going to change.
Valley could. I mean, if this was Valley in that quarterfinal, Logos, that's good. I don't know.
I mean, think about this, guys. Butte County played Kendrick last year. And from everybody I talked to, Kendrick won that game. That was the game where, of course, Dylan Waymeyer collapsed on the sideline and they called the game in the second half. But Kendrick got out to a big lead and Butte County was coming back on him. And people I talked to say, I think Butte County could have done it. I think they could have come back and beat Kendrick. So that certainly lies ahead. Potential semifinal, Butte County and Logos, they played in the season opener, our debut Gem State game of the week, and Logos got out to a big lead, and Butte County came back on them and beat them. So really, to me, there's a top three right now. Kendrick, Butte County, Logos. Oh, I hope all three make it to the semifinals, and I hope we get to see them duke it out. So should be a lot of fun. And we'll see Kendrick and Logos play in league play next week. Should be a really fun one. All right, guys, we will take a break here on Gem State Game Day. When we come back, we'll take a look at the 3A and 4A slate ahead of week 8 of the high school football season. Don't go anywhere. Gem State Game Day back after this on IdahoSports.com.
We're a valley-wide country store. For 100 years, we've been your number one choice for food, fuel, farm supplies, and just about everything else you could need to get you through your day. We know you work until the job is done, and so do we. For gas on the go or a little extra to help you get down the road, you can count on us. We are proud to employ your neighbors and to be a cornerstone of your community. We're valley-wide. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We're here for you.
Welcome back to Gem State Game Day on IdahoSports.com. Brandon Baney with Paul Kingsbury and Scott Burton. Let's jump into the 3A ranks this week, guys. Week 8 of the high school football season. Standings on the left, schedule of games on the right. Grangeville and Kellogg continue to be tied in the Central Idaho League up north. They're both 2-0. Nampa Christian is 2-0 in the Western Idaho Conference. Marsing is 1-0. Hey, they play each other this week. We'll get some clarity in the WIC. In the Nuclear Conference, Firth is 2-0. North Fremont is 1-0. And then the Southeast Idaho Conference, holy smokes, Aberdeen and Malad are 2-0. We all saw that coming into the season, right, guys? Not Declo and Westside tied at the top. No, Aberdeen and Malad, Paul.
Yeah, and Aberdeen is that we used to see them all the time, and now to see them back, I think it's great. And the people of Aberdeen deserve it. They've been, Tiger fans forever, and that's the game I looked at. And Malad is probably the one team in that conference that's going to give them problems. They beat Declo, I think 8-0 early on, which is a feat. But I think Aberdeen's the real deal. They got a first-year head coach in Malad, Brady Price, and like 12-year senior Brady Scholl down there. I mean, we've been calling his name for years and years in football and basketball. Supposedly he's a senior, but I don't know. He's been around a long time. I think when you start playing varsity as a freshman, you're around a lot. So watching those two play like that, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, Aberdeen is a team that's going to grind you into dust. They don't have a lot of guys. There's like 16 guys on the roster in 11-man football. It's something crazy like that, but their defense is so good. Their running game just grinds you into dust, but they play a low possession game. Even last week, they beat North Fremont 29-0. Final score a little deceptive. Into the late third quarter, it was still 8-0. And again, they beat Declo 8-0 earlier this year. So yes, if you can just keep pace with Aberdeen in a low possession game and cash in on your opportunities, it's a tightrope that Aberdeen walks, and they've walked it superbly so far this year. We'll figure out if Malad is legit or not. 3-2 overall, 2-0 in the league. Declo, of course, beat Westside 6-0 2 weeks ago, and then had a bye last week. They are at home against Soda Springs. Westside is at Wendell. Scott, what jumps out to you on this Week 8 schedule?
Well, the thing that jumped out to me, and I took a look at that Malad Aberdeen game as well, but the one that I focused on was North Fremont and Firth. These are two rivals that, like we talked about earlier in the broadcast, they're going to bring out the best in each other. But, kind of doing a deep dive on these two teams. I mean, North Fremont tied for third in the latest coaches poll. Firth, number 5. The Nuclear Conference lead up for grabs. And, you take a look at this North Fremont team, and I think the big question surrounding them is, they're coming in at 4-1, but who have they beaten? I mean, Salmon, Kellogg, Melba. I mean, the teams that they have beaten have a combined record of 5-17. Okay. They got dumped by Aberdeen, who's really good, 29-0. And now they're going to play another good team in Firth, who's sitting at 4-2. Is North Fremont for real? And I think this is the game that North Fremont needs to have to prove that they are for real. And they have to beat good teams. And they haven't done it yet. They've got 2 on their schedule. This is the second one. And let's see what they do. North Fremont offensively, they're not going to throw the ball around. In fact, they've got 24 pass attempts in 5 games, but they're going to control the clock. Roy Wynn, Andrew Martin, those are the guys that are going to be the ground and pound dudes that are going to just control the clock for North Fremont. But defensively, they've got some guys that can, fly around and tackle. Owen Reed, their leading tackler, Hunter Hogel, Dodge Wynn, Bryce Nedrow, Ruger Lenz. These are guys that are going to be around the football and are really going to have to tackle well for North Fremont because they need that signature win. They don't have it. Meanwhile, Firth, their 2 losses are to powerhouses, Westside and Declo. And, their signature win came over Ryrie. And Daryl Vasquez, their athletic, shifty quarterback, I mean, he's a guy that's going to be kind of leading the way for Firth. So I think the storylines behind this particular game is really what intrigued me. Is North Fremont for real? And can they handle Vasquez, the Firth quarterback?
Yeah, and Firth has one of the best defensive coaches in the whole state. Their head coach, Rigo Vasquez, he just is a defensive tactician, so I can't wait to see how he schemes up the Firth defense against North Fremont. New Plymouth is playing Kellogg in a neutral site game at Prairie High School. Those are always fun, but the game I will hone in on, guys, is Nampa Christian at Marcine. Marcine is 4-1, kind of like a North Fremont 4-1. The strength of schedule hasn't been the strongest for Marcine, but they made the playoffs for the first time in forever last year under coach Shea McClellan. He's now at Valley View. New coach, name should be familiar, Mike Forestier. He's been a coach in Oregon. He's been a coach in Idaho for a long time. So Marcine's 4-1. Nampa Christian is the team I still think is the best team in this league. When I look on paper and I look at all the pieces they have, yes, Nampa Christian's 3-3. They've played some tough teams out of the gate, and they're 2-0 where it counts in the WIC. So that is the game that I have on my radar. Nampa Christian at Marcine. Okay, let's take a look, guys, at the current 3A playoff bracket. If the playoffs started today, what would it look like? Again, 4 districts now that Declo and Wendell have joined up with Southeast Idaho. So it's pretty simple. The 4 district champions get first round buys. They get the home game in the quarterfinal round as well. So that would be, for the moment, Aberdeen at 1, Firth at 2, Nampa Christian at 3, Grangeville at 4. Otherwise, the remaining slots go to the highest ranked Max Preps teams. The one wrinkle here is the football committee reserves the right to alter the first round matchups. If for some reason you had a team from North Idaho, like let's say Grangeville had to travel all the way down to Malad, they might alter that and say, Grangeville, why don't you go to District 3 instead, and we'll send somebody a little closer to the southeast part of the state. Now, last year, it didn't end up affecting anything. They just kept the matchups based upon Max Preps. And in this current bracket, the way we have it projected, there wouldn't be a need to really make any changes. It would be Melba at Declo, Malad at West Side, Marcin at Firth, and West Jefferson at Ryrie. Paul, a lot of East Idaho teams represented in this bracket.
There is. My first question, though, is who's on the football committee? What is this football committee that makes this decision?
It's the 3A football committee. So each classification is in charge of making their own playoff bracket. That's why there's not a uniform bracketing process across all of the classifications.
Have you been asked to be on a committee?
I have not. I believe it's coaches and ADs, Paul.
Scott? No, nothing? Man, we never get the good stuff. We never get the committee assignments. All right. You're right. Going back to what you said, though, Eastern Idaho heavy, right? I mean, both sides, number 1 and number 2, Aberdeen and Firth. I mean, do we just pencil in a trip to ICCU Arena in Pocatello right now for that championship?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much could. And the interesting thing also is last year they capped it. They said, oh, yeah, we're going to award at-large bids to the next 8 highest-ranked Max Preps teams, but no conference can have more than 3 teams in the bracket. So for a long time last year, you had Malad as the 4th best team in a loaded conference with Bear Lake and Aberdeen and Westside last year. And Malad would have been good enough to make the playoffs, but because of that arbitrary cutoff of 3, ultimately they finished below everybody in the Max Preps rankings anyways. But I was glad to see they did away with that, because we should just get the best teams in it. And if they all come from East Idaho, so be it.
Yeah. If you're upset about losing, get better. That's just kind of my opinion on all of this. So you're right. I'm glad they did away with it. Less DEI, the better.
Scott, teams that are on the cut line really, Priest River, potentially. They're 3-2. They had a big win over Colville, Washington last week. They set a new school record with 6 takeaways, 6 interceptions on defense. If they really come through from North Idaho, maybe they could jump up. New Plymouth will pretty much has to win this neutral site game to stay in the mix. Against Kellogg, that's almost a knockout game right there, 14-15 in the Max Preps rankings. So this one also seems to me pretty well defined. Maybe that last playoff spot, if Melba doesn't start riding the ship here, maybe they are in jeopardy of finishing out of it. But this looks to me like pretty well defined. It's just a matter of where everybody's going to end up on the seed line.
Yeah, I agree. And looking at this could be one of the most even divisions 1 through 5 that you're going to find, because I can't tell you who is going to be the best team here. There's going to be a lot of factors that are going to play into it, and sometimes those little things make a huge difference. Whether it is you get a draw where you're traveling, or maybe you get a significant injury at the wrong time, or just a little thing is going to make the difference when you have all these teams all log jammed, kind of at the same place. And I really have just become fond of this Southeast Idaho Conference with the addition of Declo in it, because now we're paying attention to that. At least I am here in the Magic Valley. And my gosh, you've got some solid teams in that conference, and it just makes everybody better. You're looking at that conference where you've got the 1st and 2nd place team in the state that are in that conference. So I really like this conference, and I like this division. I think it's very even. It could be anybody 1 through 5.
Yeah, the top 3 teams in the Max Preps rankings, all from that Southeast Idaho Conference: Aberdeen, Declo, and Westside. And East Idaho then takes the next 4 slots, all from the Nuclear Conference: Firth, Ryrie, North Fremont, and West J. So East Idaho right now, the top 7 spots in the Max Preps rankings, and they're all playing each other. So that's only going to continue. The rising tide will lift all boats. So that is going to be really interesting to see as we go down the stretch. So that's what's going on in 3A football. Let's take a look, guys, at Class 4A football, where, man, every week there seems to be some sort of seismic shakeup. We had Kimberly beat Sugar Salem a couple weeks ago. Weiser takes out Homedale this week. Who knows? Intermountain League still hasn't begun conference play, nor has the Mountain Rivers Conference over in District 6. But in the Snake River Valley Conference, Fruitland and Weiser are both 2-0. Buell is 2-0 in the Sawtooth Central Idaho Conference. Kimberly is 1-0. Snake River still leading the Southeast Idaho Conference at 1-0. Scott, We've got some pretty interesting matchups on paper this week, but what are you looking at here for the Week 8 slate in Class 4A?
Boy, I tell you what, this 4A division could be one of the most competitive divisions in all of football and one of the hardest to win. You have got some perennial powers year in and year out in this 4A conference. And I focused in on the most obvious. It's number 2 Fruitland visiting number 1 Homedale. This is a team in Fruitland that's going to go on the road, averaging 41 points a game, holding their opponents to 13. But, this is also a Fruitland team undefeated that hasn't had a close game since week 1 when they beat Kimberly. They have been cruising. And so when you sometimes go that long without kind of a fight, and then you find yourself in one, how are you going to respond? Because you're going to have to draw from something. Fruitland hasn't had that. Now they do have some fantastic players. Titus Vidlak, quarterback, almost 1,200 yards passing, nearly 200 yards a game, 14 touchdowns. Mackenzie, the running back, is averaging 120 yards a game. And you've got a really good trio of receivers with Tracy, Philpott, and Kaufman. So these guys have got weapons, and they're scoring that many points for a reason. On the other side of the ball, Quinn Hood, their leading tackler, averaging over 13 tackles a game. But, they've got a group of dudes on defense, Mordhorst, Cisneros, Walker, and a whole bunch of others that are really balancing out Fruitland. This is a really balanced Fruitland team. Now you flip the script and you go to Homedale. Well, Homedale just got their teeth knocked in by Weiser. And nobody really saw that one coming, unless you're from Weiser, But it wasn't the fact that Weiser won. It was the Weiser dominated. Defensively, they had their way with Homedale. You mentioned this in the opener, 4 turnovers or 5 turnovers, I think 4 fumbles and an interception. But, this is a Homedale team that, they don't have like the giant stars, but they are so extremely well coached, very disciplined, that they just don't make a lot of mistakes. And so for them to come out and turn the ball over 5 times last week, that's uncharacteristic of this Homedale team. And so I'm interested to see what are they going to do in response after coming off a loss. And now you've got perhaps the conference title at stake here. What are you going to do? And so that's what gets me with this game.
Paul, what are you looking at for Week 8?
I'm going to piggyback off of everything Scott just said. Fruitland, they've been accused of having kind of a light schedule, and they have, but they've dominated that light schedule. So, being a victim of your schedule, it happens. But now they're coming into really the end. So they've got Homedale this week. They've got Weiser and then McCall again. Now, the last time Fruitland won, last time they beat Homedale was 2017. They beat them 31-15. And over the next 6 years, Homedale has outscored Fruitland in those games 288 points to 34 points with 3 shutouts. So Homedale, it's kind of like the Weiser, except Weiser, I think, had been 14 years. So Homedale now has Fruitland, who looks at Weiser and says, "Oh, you found the chink in their armor." So do they kind of imitate the defensive strategy that Weiser took of double, triple teaming the receivers? Luke Henry out there? I don't know. Do they? But I think that Fruitland has a shot. In fact, you'll see how much I think they have a shot when we check out our pick 6 this week. So basically next week, no one can say, no one saw Weiser winning. Well, if Fruitland wins, I'm going to be smart. And if they lose, I'm still going to be in last place. So we've got nothing to lose on that. But again, it's going to be a great one. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, other games I'm keeping an eye on. Moscow finally gets into Intermountain League play. The Bears have suffered back-to-back losses to opponents that we're not used to seeing on the schedule, at least non-Idaho opponents. They lost to Lethbridge, Canada, last week by 3 for their second loss. So Moscow's 5-2. They're hosting Bonners Ferry in their league opener. I think also Gooding at Filer. Gooding started the season 4-1. It was a light schedule. They wanted to build some momentum going into conference play. They hung tough with Buell for a half, and then Buell kind of put them away in the second half. Now Filer, comes to the forefront here. Filer is 2-4. They've played a tougher schedule than Gooding. Both of these teams right now are on the outside of the playoff picture, as we'll show here in just a moment. So this is, to me, kind of a de facto playoff game between Gooding and Filer. Winner will still be in good position. Loser will really be behind the 8 ball. And then in the Southeast Idaho Conference as well, guys, Snake River is 1-0, but look out for Marsh Valley. They're 4-1 on the season. They've got a new coach in Jared Michelson. So they lost their coach from last year, and then they lost their quarterback, Keaton Belknap. He transferred to Highland, and all he's doing is flourishing for this Class 6A Rams. And yet, Coach Michelson has brought these kids together. He's got them believing in each other. And so Marsh Valley at Snake River, winner of that will be in a good spot in the Southeast Idaho Conference as well. So that's the game I'm keeping an eye on there. If the 4A playoffs started today, guys, here's what it would look like. 5 district champions receive automatic bids. The remaining 7 slots go to the highest ranked Max Preps teams. How about this, though? The final Max Preps rankings will be used to seed all 12 teams this year, which means if you look here, guys, you've got 3 teams from the same conference that would all get a first-round bye in this scenario. Just because you're a league champ doesn't mean you get a first-round bye necessarily. So Sugar is 1, and then Fruitland 2, Weiser 3, Homedale 4. They would all get byes in the opening round. You'd have 9 and 8, McCall Donnelly and Marsh Valley, 12 and 5, Teton and Buell, Snake River the 10 at Moscow the 7, and then the 11-6 would be American Falls at Kimberly. Pretty noteworthy. Teton right now is the last team in, despite being 1 and 5. That's a testament to their strength of schedule. Gooding, who's 4 and 1, would be the first team out. So Gooding, Timberlake, Filer, Bonners Ferry, South Fremont, they all kind of still have work to do if they want to play their way into the playoffs. Scott, what do you think of this hypothetical bracket?
Holy cow. This one is tough. Like I said at the top of the segment, this 4A class is something else. And the thing that's grabbing my attention a little bit is, those teams on the bubble and, coming out of the Sawtooth, the SCIC conference. It's a win-out situation for Kimberly, Gooding, Buell. They cannot afford to drop one, especially if you are Gooding. You're looking at this Gooding team who's being left out right now. They've got Filer, and I think they should be able to get through Filer. They should be able to get by Wood River. And then that final game of the season against Kimberly could determine whether or not they make the playoffs. And probably could be the same with Kimberly, depending on how they do. So that's what's got my attention, is how this conference is going to finish, because you've got Buell, Gooding, Kimberly, all going to battle each other down the stretch.
And if Moscow gets toppled by Timberlake or Bonners Ferry, they're currently 14th and 15th. That would also change the dynamics a little bit too. So, Paul, what do you think about this bracket?
I'm really torn about not giving the conference champion a bye, giving them that one spot. If you win your district, there should be a reward for that. However, if you've got a really crappy district, then you've got, a top 5 team playing to get in, and who knows what happens in that game, and maybe they don't. But I'm also looking at this going, well, the whole point of moving to this system was to get the best championship games. We've got Sugar and Homedale probably playing in the semis, and Fruitland Weiser probably playing in the semis. And so your championship's still going to be good, make no doubt.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I can see it both ways. I'm going to have to think on this. Scott, what do you think?
I think this particular division in the 4A may have the best semifinal games of any of the other classifications.
Yeah.
Just because the 4 teams that are going to be left standing, they're going to be really good teams. And so, yeah, you're right, Paul. The championship game is going to be the championship game. It's going to be awesome. But these semifinal games that we're going to see in this 4A division could be just epic.
Yep. It's going to be really interesting to see how this shakes out. All right, guys, when we come back, we'll get to my least favorite bracketing setup of any of the 6 classifications. The Class 5A bracket. Yeah, Scott, I hate's a strong word. I dislike the way the 5A bracket is set up. We'll talk about it, and of course, all the big 5A and 6A matchups when Gem State Game Day rolls on right after this on IdahoSports.com.
Later.
Here. Go. Thank you.
Hello?
I was in an accident.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I had my seatbelt on.
This is Gem State Game Day on IdahoSports.com. Brandon Baney with Paul Kingsbury and Scott Burton. Let's get to the Class 5A landscape here in Week 8. This is our largest division, so we go tiny font here. Make your screen large size if you are having trouble seeing it all. Standings on the left, schedule of games on the right. Still no league play in the Inland Empire League up north or the Southeast Idaho Conference. Otherwise, Bishop Kelly and Valley View, both 3-0 in the Southern Idaho Conference. Minico and Twin Falls, both 3-0 in the Great Basin Conference. And it's Skyline still leading the High Country Conference at 4-0. Paul, schedule the games here, Week 8, Class 5A. What jumps out to you?
You know, I'm looking at Bishop Kelly, Valley View, number 1, number 2. In that 5A SIC. And it's another one of those, we talked about a couple of them. It's the prove it game for Valley View. You know, they've had a pretty, I don't know, I want to say soft, but it hasn't been as hard as it could have been. I think if they could have played Twin Falls in that opening, it was canceled because of smoke, would have a better idea. But coming in, you know, they just beat Ridgeview 44-7. They beat Caldwell 50-0. So their offense can score. Head coach Shea McClellan, he played for the Bears, Patriots. Guy knows football, but so does Bishop Kelly head coach Chris Kulik. I mean, he's been around, and he's won games. So these two teams, Bishop Kelly, we saw lose early on at the Rumble, I believe, right? Or was that at Rigby?
That was at Rigby.
At Rigby. So that's Rigby. So I mean, everybody loses to Rigby. So it's going to be a good prove-it game for Valley View. Are the Falcons the real deal? We're going to see after this one. And it's another one of those where, in my opinion, sure, they might lose, but it's going to be how they lose that really determines the quality of the team to me. If they get blown out 50-6, okay, then yeah, they're not. But if it's closer, you know, and it's 28 to 20, okay, I can respect that a lot more. And Valley View's got, after Bishop Kelly, they've got Columbia and Nampa. And Nampa's right in the middle of the pack. Columbia is right underneath that. So they could have a kind of a clearer schedule for them. So they could eke out, still be number 2 at the end, but it's going to be prove it.
And that's important to finish first or second, and we'll tell you why when we show the bracket. Scott, what's the game you're looking at?
Well, you know what? I had the same one. I had Valley View and Bishop Kelly just because, you know what, if you're gonna be the best, you got to beat the best. And over the years, Bishop Kelly has really kind of been, you know, the standard in 5A. Used to be 4A, but this isn't the same Bishop Kelly team. You know, I mean, they're coming in ranked number 2, 1 loss on the record, have a couple of good wins, but you ask people, this is not as strong of a Bishop Kelly team as years past. But now, again, you're measuring that against Bishop Kelly teams that have been absolutely dominant and could beat a lot of 6A teams, right? So it'll just be interesting to see if Valley View's got enough to hang with Bishop Kelly. Now, Valley View's not going to wow you with anything spectacular. They're going to give the ball to Onyx Carson and let him try to run. You know, he's a kid that's averaging 164 yards a game on the ground, and, you know, they're going to need every yard of that to keep ball away from Bishop Kelly. They're just going to have to control it, you know, and I don't know. We'll see what happens. Bishop Kelly, though, I mean, defensively, they're coming in having 3 straight shutouts. I mean, the last time they gave up any points was, you know, 4 weeks ago in a loss to Rigby. And after that loss to Rigby, they haven't let anybody score. They beat Nampa 19-0, Columbia 54-0, Skyview 24-0. So I don't know. We'll see. And I think you're right, Paul. It's either kind of put up or shut up for Valley View. You're going to be able to hang with BK? Well, here's your chance.
Yep. Other games I'm keeping an eye on this week, guys. Southeast Idaho Conference play finally gets underway. Preston at Century. Pocatello gets the first bye here over the final 3-week sprint for those 3 teams. Shelley at Bonneville. Each of these teams are 2-4. It's getting early. It's getting late early for each of these teams, or early late, however the saying goes for these teams. They're both 2-4. Both would be in the playoffs at this point, but you got to start bankrolling some wins. Hillcrest is at Twin Falls. That's going to be a juicy non-conference matchup there. You're talking about, and you'll see it when we get to the Max Preps rankings, Twin Falls is only 15th in the current Max Preps rankings. Now, if they take care of business and beat Hillcrest, that number is going to go up. They're going to jump up significantly, you would think, or maybe not, because none of us really know how Max Prep plays. And then finally up north, Lewiston at Sandpoint. That's right. Lewiston dropped down this year to 5A football. And right away, they get the reigning champs from Sandpoint. Sandpoint has owned this league over the past several years. Can Lewiston wrest it away from them? We will find out. Let's take a look, though, guys. If the playoffs started today in the 5A postseason, what would it look like? A 16-team bracket. First of all, that's a lot of teams. I think you could probably whittle this down a little bit and be okay. The second thing I don't like about this bracket is the top 8 seeds all go to automatic qualifiers based on district representation. So automatically, one team from District 1, 2, one team from District 5, and then 2 teams from each of Districts 3, 4, and 6 all get seeded into the top 8. It's all determined on Max Preps rankings. And then the remaining 8 at-large seeds are seeded by Max Preps. And so Skyline 1, that checks out. Hillcrest 2, okay. Bishop Kelly 3, yes, you've got me. Lakeland 4, yes. Then you go, Lewiston, currently 5th in the Max Preps rankings, but District 1 and 2 only gets one of those automatic qualifiers. So Lewiston drops all the way down to number 9 in this bracket, and they're hitting the road to go somewhere. And by the way, Lewiston's not close to anything, so it's a long trip for them no matter where they're going. And then you look at, from there, Blackfoot would be 6th. Okay, well, they're now dropped down to the number 10 seed because you've already got 2 qualifiers from the East. Minico, Valley View, Pocatello, those are all teams. So that's what I don't like about this bracket, Scott. And you tell me if I'm wrong here, but you've got a lot of teams that are ranked higher that are having to hit the road just in deference to, a second place finisher from a district that has more teams available.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this bracket. There's too many teams in it. And what you're going to end up doing is you're going to have like a 1-7 team hit the road for 300 miles to take on an undefeated team and just get waxed and come home. And we can do without that game, I think, first of all, they got to shrink the bracket. And second of all, yeah, you're right. There's too many teams, the way this is set up, that could be left home that are really good. And we see this year in and year out in basketball in this particular division, with the Preston Century Pocatello
Century. Yeah.
Yeah. That whole debacle that is year in and year out, a signature of the way the state tournaments are run in this particular classification. And I don't know why 5A's got to be different, but it is. And I don't think it's a better different.
Yeah, so right now, like Twin Falls, they're 15th in the Max Preps rankings. They'd get the number 8 seed, and they would host Lewiston, who would have to travel all the way down. That's a significant home field advantage for Twin Falls. Now, I think Twin Falls is a lot better than the 15th team in 4A football. I'm not sure what's going on with the rankings there. I think Twin Falls is pretty good. But it's a microcosm of the problems this bracket in particular presents. If you're on the cut line in this classification and you don't make it, you can only look in the mirror. Skyview would be the first team out right now, and they're 0-6. So,
right. That's exactly the problem with this. You're letting in those teams, and nothing against them. But my gosh, why would you want to go to the playoffs when you've got 1 win, no wins, and just to get absolutely shellacked? So it has to shrink. And you're right, Brandon. That's the problem.
Yep. All right, guys, let's wrap up with the Class 6A action here in Week 8. Standings on the left, schedule on the right. No conference play until this week in the Inland Empire League. Lake City at Coeur d'Alene, and we'll get it started. Post Falls is the best team overall at 5-1. We're starting to see some clarity in the Southern Idaho Conference, the Foothills Division. Rocky Mountain and Middleton are both 3-0. Timberline is 2-1. In the River Division, Bora and Eagle are both 3-0. Cuna is 2-1. And in the High Country Conference, Madison and Rigby, both 1-0 in league play. Rigby, I think, had the tougher win over Highland. Madison's win was over Thunder Ridge. And Paul, those two just happen to be playing each other this Friday night. Those two, they don't really care for one another. But is this the game you were going to highlight, or were you going somewhere else?
Cuna Eagle.
Okay.
Cuna Eagle. And it's just one of those games. Cuna, full disclosure, I live in Cuna. Kids go to Cuna. But they lost to Rocky, okay, and then they lost to Timberline. And then they've won everything last week, lost to Bora. They beat Owyhee. They got creamed by Bora last week. Moving on, they've got Eagle and then Boise. So Eagle coming out 5-1, 3-0. Are they as good as that 5-1? I think that's what we're going to see. This is another one of those games, I think, that I talked about with a couple other teams. Cuna needs to prove it this week, right? They need to come out, and it's at Eagle, which makes it even harder. And so Cuna at Eagle, first-year head coach Bo Smith's done a great job at Cuna. There was a lot of pomp and circumstance when he took the job over the summer, and he's done a good job. He's got the talent. He's using it. But are we going to see Cuna really finish off the season and make the playoffs, make a run? This Friday is going to be the game that really seals it or cans it for me.
Yeah, Eagle had that kind of head-scratching win over Owyhee last week. 7-5 was the final. I mean, I saw the San Diego Padres and Los Angeles Dodgers nearly score that many runs in a playoff game earlier this week. So that's like a baseball score there. So this is going to tell me a lot about Eagle, I think, more so than Cuna even. Scott, you're going to hone in on this Madison-Rigby game, right? These two sides do not care for each other, and Madison comes in for the first time, and I can't remember when, as the team with the better overall record. They're 6-0. They haven't lost yet. Rigby is 5-1. Only loss was to Coeur d'Alene in the season opener by 10, but boy, they have looked good since that setback.
And that's exactly right. This is the game that I focused in on, and for all the reasons you just mentioned, it is a rivalry game. There is no love lost between these two. They're very, very good football teams, and this is a game that means something. But I'm looking at these two teams. Madison, they're the only team of all the games that I chose in all the divisions. Madison's the only team that isn't ranked. Rigby comes in at number 5. But this is a Madison team that has some dudes up front on the defensive line. They move people. And if you've got that, you will be in every game that you play. And that's the core of Madison. Meanwhile, Rigby, they lost their opener to Coeur d'Alene, but since that time, they've been outscoring their opponents 34-14. And then they handed Highland their first loss of the season and beat them by 30. So you're like, okay, is this a Rigby team for real? Highland come out and lay an egg. What's going on here? But I think this is an interesting game for Rigby for a couple of reasons. Number one, you've got Madison coming in, rivalry, undefeated. Who would not like to put a blemish, the first blemish, maybe the only one, on your rival's record? Second, they had a huge win over Highland. Is this a letdown game? Are they going to be able to get up 2 weeks in a row? I think they will. So this is the game that stood out to me.
Yeah, it's going to be a fantastic battle between Madison and Rigby. Middleton and Rocky Mountain are playing. Those are the two teams that are 3-0 in Foothills Division play over there in the SIC. Middleton has pulled a couple of games out of the fire. Not going to be able to do that against Rocky Mountain. This Rocky team is pretty legit. And then Lake City and Coeur d'Alene kind of get their season started up north in the Inland Empire League, first IEL game. They're Lake City very quietly 4-2, and they only lost to Highland like 7-3 or 10-7, whatever that was earlier this year. I think Lake City is a team that's kind of lurking, and a win over Coeur d'Alene would increase their stock exponentially. Let's take a look, guys. If the playoffs started today in the 6A classification, what would it look like? Well, there's the 4 first round buys. That always goes to the champions from the East and the North, and then the 2 teams that play for the SIC championships. Right now, that would be Rocky Mountain, Rigby, Coeur d'Alene, and Eagle. And then 10 of the other at-large bids that are available, 6 of them are given out automatically based on district representation. Essentially, East Idaho gets a second team, which would be right now Madison. North Idaho gets a second team, which at this point would be Post Falls. And then the Boise area picks up the other 4 quote-unquote auto qualifiers, and that would be Middleton, Timberline, Bora, and Cuna. And then the last 2 at-large spots are awarded based on Max Prep's rankings. And right now we would have Highland in as the number 11 seed at large and Boise in as the number 12 seed at large. Owyhee just missing out on the cut line right now. Mountain View and Lake City are both right there. And even Meridian at 1 and 5, Paul, is not totally dead yet. Meridian, Mountain View, Owyhee, though, they've got to start finding wins somewhere on the schedule if they want to leapfrog somebody.
Yeah, and it's almost too late. I mean, they might have some good ones on the rest of their schedule, but I just don't see the rest of the teams losing. Because if you want to move up, and trust me, since I'm last in the picks, I realize for me to move up, somebody's got to move down, and I just don't see that happening for those guys.
Yeah, and further complicating matters is I'll bring up the standings again really quickly, because the way the SIC does things is the final week of the season is strictly for playoff games. The top 2 teams from each division play in the SIC championship game, and then the bottom 2 teams, the 6th place finisher in each division, play essentially in their own kind of game, but they're kind of removed from the playoff proceedings. And then the 2nd place team plays the 5th place team, and the 3rd place team plays the 4th place team in these cross-divisional brackets. And so if you look at this in the River Division, especially, somebody, Boise, Owyhee, Mountain View, is going to be stuck in that kind of 6th place game, and they're not even going to have a shot at earning a playoff spot, Paul.
No, and that's what you get for having a great big conference. You have to split it into 2 divisions. There's going to be a playoff, a couple of playoffs. So you got to win your games when you're in a conference that big. You just have to win your games. That's just what it comes down to. And if you lose a few, it makes it really hard to get into that state tournament.
Yeah, I mean, Boise at Owyhee this week, that is a de facto elimination game. Both of those teams were playoff teams a season ago. All right, Paul. Go ahead.
I'd be remiss if I didn't suggest this. Going back to Rigby Madison, can we dub that the Celestial Bowl? There in Eastern Idaho. It's a Mormon joke. You guys might not get it. But the Eastern Idaho fans watching this, they're laughing right now. So if we can dub that game the Celestial Bowl, make T-shirts, hats, all over it. Credit me.
Okay. I'm into it. I have no idea what it means, but sure. I trust you. It's all good. Okay, guys, we will take a break and come back and wrap things up with our IdahoSports.com pick 6. Spoiler alert. Paul's back in a familiar place, the basement. And Scott, meanwhile, in the penthouse. Yeah. Top floor of Trump Tower. So yeah, we'll be back right after this on IdahoSports.com.
A hit in the morning, another between class, after school, and more before bed. Vaping sucks you in quick. Not to mention all the chemicals and health problems everyone's talking about. That's why thousands of teens are ready to take back their life their own way with My Life, My Quit. When you sign up with us, you'll get a free and simple quit plan that makes it easier to stop vaping. Visit mylifemyquit.com or text Start My Quit to 36072.
Welcome back to Gem State Game Day one last time. Brandon Baney with Paul Kingsbury and Scott Burton. Let's take a look at what's on tonight. Yeah, the IdahoSports.com game streams schedule here in week 8. We've got our Gem State game of the week, Cary at Dietrich. We've got Preston at Century in the first game of the conference slate there, and then Blackfoot at Idaho Falls. And for Blackfoot, they're going to try and keep the winning ways going. Those are all this Friday night, 7 o'clock kickoffs on IdahoSports.com. But Cary and Dietrich, the headliner, certainly our Gem State game of the week. So are you ready? Let's get to our IdahoSports.com pick 6. There's 6 prep casters here at IdahoSports.com, and each week we pick the outcome of 6 different games, one for each classification in the great state of Idaho. Let's go ahead and take a look at this week's Pick 6 selections. There's Scott. He's still in first place in the season standings at 31-11. Ryan Skaggs a game back at 30-12. I'm 2 games back of Scotty at 29-13. Logan Green, Sean Kane, and Paul Kingsbury make up the latter half of our standings. Our Pick 6 games this week: Rigby Madison, Lewiston Sandpoint, Fruitland Homedale, Nampa Christian Marsing, Oakley and Murtaugh, and then Cary and Dietrich. Scott, you chose Marsing to beat Nampa Christian, as did Paul. I will give you my explanation. I think Nampa Christian is the best team in this conference. I look at them on paper. I look at the athletes they have, great linebacking core on defense. That's why I went with Nampa Christian. You guys both picked Murtaugh. I went with Oakley. This is a true coin flip of a game, right? They're both 0-6. I just think Oakley, they have that tradition. They're the Boxcar brothers. I don't know. Call me crazy. I'm going with Oakley there. Paul, you took Dietrich. Scott and I both picked Cary. Give us your reasoning there. I mean, they're both really good teams, but what made you go Dietrich?
What do I have to lose? I mean, at the introduction of this, you said that our prep casters pick the outcomes. Well, I don't. I pick losers. Is what happens. Not saying that any of these teams that came out wrong. I'm going to stop that now. But I hate picking games that I'm going to be at, especially a Cary and Dietrich when I know so many people on both sides. I hate picking those games. So I did it because you guys picked Cary.
And everybody knows we do this in fun. And like I said, when we all picked Buell to lose earlier this season, we brought on 4 of their players and their head coach, and they let me have it. They read me the riot act. That's really what it's all about. It's just for fun. Scott, you took Lewiston over Sandpoint along with Paul. What went into your factor there?
Well, you know what? Looking at, let me bring up my notes here. Lewiston and Sandpoint up north. I probably should have just deferred to you a little bit because that is right in your backyard. But I'm looking at Lewiston at a 3-3 record, Sandpoint at 3-4. The game itself is going to be at Sandpoint, and I needed a contrarian pick.
Yeah,
and I think this was the one that I thought everybody else was going to go Sandpoint. So, I mean, it was my contrarian pick because whenever I choose these things, I try to find one in there that could probably go, either way in my mind that I really don't have a clue, but try to guess what others would do and then do the opposite.
It's worked well for you so far this year. You and I picked 3 games differently. So I'm either going to overtake you or you were going to open up an insurmountable lead. That's how this is going to go. This is a separation week, Scott. So
let's go.
I'm excited to see how it all shakes out. You might be wondering, hey, where's Logan's picks? Where's Ryan Skaggs' picks? You'll have to stay tuned to IdahoSports.com's social media. We always release the full complement of Pick 6 selections after Gem State Game Day on either Thursday or Friday. So stay tuned there. But that'll do it for this edition of Gem State Game Day on IdahoSports.com. Paul Kingsbury, as always, thanks for hopping in and doing this. You're going to be in the host's chair next week for Gem State Game Day.
I am.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's going to go off the rails quick. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Without you babysitting, yeah.
It's going to be must-see TV, I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Scott and I have a planning session in a couple of days to really talk about what we're going to do. And we're not going to tell anybody else.
Yeah.
Nope.
They're going to be props, costumes, might be some live animals.
Well, we already had a live animal early on in this show, climbing up. But there could be various other. Not saying there will, not saying there won't. It could, yeah.
Can't wait to know it all unfolds next week on Gem State Game Day. But until then, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Enjoy the Week 8 slate of action. And for Paul Kingsbury and Scott Burton, my name is Brandon Baney. Thanks for tuning in to Gem State Game Day on IdahoSports.com.